also remind the participants.
What's up?
The participants and the Maya as well. If you could keep your camera on so that it's more engaging for the speaker, that would be nice.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, as I was saying, taking effective notes, okay, and condensing issues. So we're going to work on how you take notes. This is not just a judging skill. If you're debating, you can take those notes of your opponents, right? That's a skill we're going to work on. And condensing issues. So spotting where arguments and rebuttals interact with each other. At the end of the workshop, we'll go into FAQs, and we're going to practice. For the 6 of you in this room right now, you could stay for that, but it's optional. So after number 2, you guys can go home. It's this kind of workshop. So let's go. Most judges will not be able to write down everything people are saying. And that's an effect of just the human body. Your listening and typing skills, while formidable, I hope that they are imperfect. You will miss some things, right? That's just the biological. Besides the biological, another factor is people might be speaking English in a different manner from what you expect. And that's normal, not a lapse on your part. It's not your fault that you might not catch the English that they're using. And it's not their fault because they speak English differently from you. It's just a factor of the diversity of debating that we'll have to expect those things. So your tool to make sure that that doesn't get in the way of you debating or judging well is note-taking. It's being able to take what a speaker is saying and capturing the substance of it. And by that alone, you know that substance doesn't refer to everything that they're saying. There will be rhetorical devices and language that add to what they're saying in terms of flair and style that might not go directly into judging the material, right? So we need to start observing how that is separated, right? How that becomes distinct. I'm going to send a file to everyone in the Zoom chat. You guys walk forward and take a page each from me. All right. Here you go. Take one each of those. Just the first one. Zoom chat, it's going in the box. Where's my box? Oh, it's on the big monitor. There it is. Someone tell me if it's behind me. There you go. Okay, sending file. Okay, so in front of you should be example 1.doc. I want you guys to open that up. Example 1.doc. You will see there are 2 columns. Okay. Oh, I went too far. There's going to be a left side, and that left side contains material that a speaker said. Let me check if you're listening. Let me see my participants. Ryan, are you a participant? You're in the workshop, right? Can you speak up?
Yeah, I'm in here.
Cool. So on the left side of that example 1 is some speaker material under a topic. Could you read the topic and tell me what speaker material you're looking at?
I said the left side, right?
Yeah. Well, the topic first and then the left side.
Topic. THW abandon the practice of generating electricity through nuclear power plants.
Super. And what kind of material is on the left side?
Government arguments.
Sweet. Aurora, on the right side of that sheet, what is the material on the right? Adjudicators paraphrasing. So what you guys are looking at is a distinction between what goes into your paper as a judge and what the speaker is saying. So for, effect for the actual effect of this section, we'll need to read it out loud. And I want Hey, Jade, you're a workshopper, I hope. Can you read the left side argument as if you're debating? So you are a government speaker, prop speaker. Can you read it out loud?
Nuclear power plants unfairly endanger the lives of those who live nearby. Remember that nuclear power plants emit radiation as a consequence of the nuclear reaction necessary to boil water to spin its generator turbines. Not only is this a dangerous process to do such a mundane task, it then exposes people who live nearby to the task risks of gun drop fouling. And when their day comes, having them come to interact with cancer-causing radiation. We saw with Chernobyl and with Fukushima that even modern technology is not impervious to the occasional earthquake or to tsunami. The unfairness comes from how people often can simply move away or knowledgeably consent to these risks, whether because they economically have fewer alternatives of houses or because of cultural ties to the areas they live in. This is unfair risk, and whether they're asked to be chosen between their health or their livelihood. This is unfair on our side of the debate. When we close these reactors and force in the transition or renewable source of power, we not only avoid the exposure of these radiations to insult people, but we also have to pay the way to cleaner environment and a sustainable planet. People don't get sick, and people live through more sustainable days.
Thanks, Jade. That could be a speaker in your debate room. If you're judging, that could be an opponent of yours. That's how language works. Not everything that Jade read out and that you could see in front of you will be material you factor into judging whether you won or lost, or they won or lost the debate. But you also don't want to read a speech out like on the right side. Ethan, if a debater were to stand up and to read a speech out and they read the words on the right column, what would the effect be? Yeah. Right, it'll feel abrupt. It'll feel like you're not engaging in a persuasive exercise. So we don't want the other end of the extreme. However, as a judging workshop, you do want to capture the substance of it. So on the right side are some notes. The first one is likely the conclusion of this argument. You might not agree, you might agree, but it's probably true that the conclusion of this argument is it risks people's lives. And the mechanism that creates that risk is that radiation from those nuclear reactors could bypass guardrails. There could be accidents. A caveat would be, it's unfair even if you say yes to it. That just means that you can't say yes to dying, right? Like you can't say in a contract that says it's okay for me to die. And the caveat there is it's unfair whether they agree to living there or they don't. And finally, an impact is that the environment improves. So these could be an adjudicator's notes. Let's check on Ryan. Ryan, there's a missing mechanism here that wasn't written down on the right side though, right? There is an action that's missing. Can you spot the missing action step that the judge didn't write down? Do you have a guess? Oh, it goes to anybody, by the way. You can unmute on the online or in front of me. Do you see a mechanism that wasn't written down on the right? Look closely. Oh, there's just something that wasn't paraphrased. No guesses? Here's a hint. It has something to do with making things safer. What creates that safer world that the speaker said that wasn't written on the right? Stephanie, do you see it?
Is it the part where the speaker is basically saying they should close down these nuclear power plants?
Yes, it's half of it. The other half is what do you replace them with? What does the speaker say? Right, the renewable energy transition. So there should be a number 5 there, which is The mechanism that creates the safer environment is this transition to renewable energy. Though other judges might say there's not enough detail into what those renewable energy replacements are going to be. But that's the task, right? You see it? As a judge, you should be writing down material so that it's easy to reference when you start thinking of who won the debate. Notice how the paragraph may not capture the language the speaker uses completely. I already talked about that. Language that the speaker uses and your final notes might not look exactly the same. Here, some vocabulary for people that might be seeing these words for the first time. A mechanism is an action or process that originates an effect. In a debate, lots of people will say lots of effects can happen. People are safer, people are less poor, people are happier, or more specifically, there's less chance of a military confrontation. There is a higher chance of people overcoming trauma. All of those things are effects, right? Often, debaters will forget to tell me how those effects happen or occur, and they want credit for the effect happening without explaining why the effect happened. That answer to why that effect happened is called a mechanism. It originates something. So back at your notes, right? That mechanism on the paper, radiation bypassing the guardrails, that's a process. That's an action that eventually leads to what effect, Evelyn? What is the effect of that mechanism? People are unsafe, right? The effect is people becoming unsafe. The other one that we just found, which is if the mechanism is replacement with renewable energy sources, the result is people live in a what world, Ethan? A cleaner, more environmentally friendly world. Second, caveat. Jade, have you seen that word before, caveat? No, first time. Anyone seen that word? Caveat, no? Yes, you've seen that word, Aurora? Where do you see it? A warning, a condition. It's basically saying that something occurs typically, but in a certain situation, it'll occur differently. So typically, differently. An example is, I will bake, let's say, butter scones most of the time, but a caveat to that is, if Santa Claus is coming, it's gonna have chocolate chips. Like basically, it creates a second scenario, right? So caveat. Here in the example, the caveat is employed in this way, that unfairness happens in either situation, whether you're staying at a nuclear power plant vicinity by choice or whether you don't get a choice, you have to live there, both are unfair because you can't choose to what, Evney? You can't say yes to what? You shouldn't be allowed to say yes to what, I mean? To dying, to getting hurt, and in this case, to living beside a nuclear reactor. Though that doesn't mean that Gov will win this part of the debate every time, right? What do people who are made to live in dangerous areas, what do they usually receive in exchange from the government? Big houses. What do they use to get those big houses? Yeah, typically, if you're told that you have to live in a dangerous area, you get compensation. That happens in places like Alaska. So if you have to live in Alaska or you decide to want to live there, you get some financial compensation or encouragement from the state. It's not an absolute debate. Let's continue. It's not that it's dangerous, Ethan. I think that with Alaska, it's mostly a matter of it's underpopulated, so you need more people to live there. And if more people live there, it becomes safer, more vibrant. There's a reason for the incentive. Okay. We could skip this one. You could read that later. We're going to go into breakout room practice now. So I'm going to send another file, and this file you'll be working on. You guys come here and get your papers. So this one is, hold on, wait for me. Not yet. Okay, here, talk about that later, Ethan. Like take one each, 2 pages each. You guys in the chat, I'll be sending you another file. Okay, there's practice one. So you can do practice one first with your breakout rooms. Talk to us later. Go away. Thank you. Practice one first. So let's assign breakout rooms. I'm gonna make 3 here. Okay. So Alistair could take room 1. Please go there. Alistair, I'll send humans your way. And Maya can take room 2. After you download the file, please go to those, you'll be going to these rooms. Okay. There you go. Maya can go to room 2. Okay. Ryan, you can go with Alistair. So I'm going to move you there in a moment. Stacy and Jade can go with Maya. Sylvia, you'll be going with Alistair too. But before you go, what are we doing? You have practice 1, right? We're also going to do it together. There are speaker material on the left column, okay? We're going to be working together to paraphrase those into the right side box, and I'm going to check if you can adapt to extract the substance of the material. For you guys on the online, you guys will be working with your group leaders and that. This exercise is good for a solid 12 to 15 minutes. Okay, you can go ahead. I'll move you now. There you go. Thanks, Michael, for being here too. If you want to observe me, you can stay here or you could go to the breakout rooms as well. But I think that you can relax now. You know, you're not feeling so well. Okay, guys, you have your sheets. Close your computers, get to work. Start with box 1. You guys have exactly 3 minutes to paraphrase box 1. Evelyn, what material is that? It's an op model. Give me the paraphrase to that op model. Go. Go ask for Mango for one to come back. Oh, there you go. 3 minutes. Say thank you for borrowing a pen. Really? Don't focus on winning or losing. Just work on the activity first, okay? 2 minutes left. I think it's pretty fair. I think it's a pretty fair debate. But yeah, you guys had a great debate last week. My gosh. I'm still so happy about that. And do it again next week. One minute. Alex goes first. It doesn't need to be in complete sentences. They're your notes, right? So it's just about effective note taking. Alex, what's your paraphrase?
So
Okay, Alex needs more time. Here's an immediate piece of feedback. Saying that nuclear power plants are valuable is not really something that you're doubting op believes in, right? So any op team would say nuclear power plants are probably good. Do you agree? In this topic? Hello, people. You agree, right? So that might not be the most important thing to write down because we know they're going to say that. It's the variance, right? It's the small differences that they would add to the material that we want to write down. Why don't you go, Evelyn? What did you paraphrase? How did you paraphrase? Mm-hmm. Maintaining, what was, oh, very good. So we have all the action steps that involve the nuclear power plants. There's a special thing that they do here though, which, let me see. There's a special thing that they do here though, related to population. Evany, did you see what the special thing they did related to population was? That's right. So she didn't see it. Aurora, did you see it? Oh, hold on, Aurora. Yes, Evany? What about them? What happens to nuclear power in those countries? You think, or this speaker thinks that? Say that again. So you don't want to write that down. That is that speaker's personal language. That does not really, that's their style. What are they saying? What is the main point? Yes, Ethan. Mm-hmm. So they like it that you would build more if the population's going up, if they need more electricity, but and that's how it's being strategic. So opposition is trying to say here that they will build more power plants sometimes and keep current ones, but not build any new ones other times, right? Based on what? The economic needs of the nation. Because government's going to say, well, isn't op just building more bombs where at any point these disasters can occur? Op says no. It's building more reactors when what, Aurora? It'll only build those new reactors when? But why is the growing population more demand for energy? That's how it's being strategic. So it's not just build more power plants randomly. It's build power plants specifically. Okay, pretty good, pretty good. Anyone want to share their notes before we move to the second box? No, but you're getting it, right? It's not about attacking the argument. It's not about rebutting the argument or building your own. It's about what, Alex? It's about proving what. No, it's about summarizing and paraphrasing the material, okay? That's what we're doing today. Alex, you understand? Okay. Second box, Alex, what are you going to be paraphrasing or summarizing in the second box? What does it say? What does it say on top in that left box, left side of that second box? Right, there's an opposition argument. Aurora, that means that op argument believes nuclear power is good or bad? Right, same process. Summarize, paraphrase on the right side box. Go. This is longer, 4 minutes, 4 minutes. Go, go, go. 2 minutes. Time is gold, people. Alex. One minute, Alex, get ready. Alex, go.
Okay. So what the first one row uranium is source of uranium are stable from countries with stable trading relations, and they are also traditional allies of the Western world. The second row, they are diversely located. Most countries have a quite stable supply, and also we can change where we get the sources of uranium. And then I wrote they can also they can change to another supplier if there are political difficulties. Yeah, that's all I wrote.
Pretty good stuff. There's one thing that that's actually most of the work. It's 80% there. There's 20% that's missing. What is a 20% that should be noted and highlighted here? Ethan, what's your guess?
Is it like they can change the fire even?
Not exactly. Almost. First, what does argument mean? It looks complicated, right? No, it's not. This argument only means, it's very simple, okay? What it means is, if you have nuclear energy in abundance, you don't need to import power. And because most of the time, we import power from dangerous nations, like whose country? Like Putin, right? Like because we have to buy from Putin, every time we import energy, we're vulnerable to his power and whims, because he can decide to what? Well, not fake it. What can he decide? To stop selling us oil, right? Nuclear energy, if it displaces our need to import oil from countries like Russia, makes us more independent. That's what the argument's saying, right? You understand? So the part that you need to highlight here is its judicious use of example, not the random fugazi. You guys know that word fugazi? You know the word fugazi? You might know you know what about the word mirage? You know the word mirage? What's a mirage? In a desert. What's a mirage? Come on. You don't know the word mirage? What about illusion? You know illusion? Okay, a mirage is like an illusion in the desert where you see water and trees, but there's really nothing, right? The examples on the upper paragraph, it's a fugazi. It's a fugazi because it's just throwing out random countries to make you think that this is relevant. What is the judicious example that they use in the second paragraph? What is it? What? The mentioning of which country in what situation? Russia. Because there is a judicious use of that example here. And debaters don't get credit for giving random examples and showing that they know a lot of countries. You don't win debates with random proper nouns, right? You win debates with the judicious use of examples. And by bringing up Russia and a clear example of Russia, who did they try to stop selling oil to get power? Who did Russia try to stop selling oil to? Who? Not Ukraine. Who? Which countries? The European Union, right? Like that judicious use of example should have been noted down. All right. What else to note here? I think that's, what about you, Evelyn? How did you paraphrase this? We have some time left. Mm-hmm. Good, right? Remember, the mechanism here is more nuclear means less need for what? Of course, but what is that material that comes from? Opposite of export? Imports. Thank you, Ebony. All right. I'm going to call the rest of the group in. Pretty good so far. You ready to try it on a real debate? Okay, we're going to try it with a real speaker next. All right, have people returned? People coming back? Okay, everyone is here. Okay, I hope that was productive. We were pretty productive here. Maya, hey, are you back in the room? Maya, can you hear me? Hi.
Hello.
Hey, I just wanted to ask what input or what did you observe in your room? Anything to share with everyone since we're back?
Yeah, I thought that so we didn't quite finish, but I thought that everyone did a pretty good job. I think the main thing is like, I guess, two general pieces of feedback. People seem to get down the main ideas, which is really great, but I think some of these like very subtle distinctions are also important to make sure that you get. So it's like, for example, in the model is talking both about moving towards renewable energy and away from fossil fuels. So making sure that you get both of those things down is really important, rather than just one or the other, even if you think one might imply the other, because those are really different. Yeah, and just like making sure that, any numbered response you get down, just, doing all those things. Yeah, I think that's the gist of it. Yeah. Just making sure to get those subtle nuances.
Don't forget that, guys. Catch the subtlety. And we don't need to be perfect about it right away. It's a process, but catching the subtlety is good. I want to hear from Alistair later after the next practice, but I did want to jump in with something for everyone to hear before we go to practice 2. Notice, you could look at the sheet, guys, look at the sheet. In the second paragraph of that op rebuttal to the gov argument, there is the use of Russia as a timely example grounded in current events. And, op argument, not rebuttal. In the second paragraph of that op argument, you have that Russia example. But in the first paragraph of the op argument, you have less relevant and less useful examples, mentioning Australia, Canada, Kazakhstan. This is a good teaching moment. There are judicious use of examples, which judges should write down and give credit to, like what happened with this Russia example usage, because it grounds the argument away from theory and brings it to a world event where Russia literally manipulated the response of the European Union to what was happening in Ukraine through deciding to sell more or less oil at a given time. That's great use of specific knowledge and should be credited well in a debate. But in the first paragraph, it's more of a fugazi, you know, like bringing up all these examples and statistics aren't really as relevant to the main idea of the point. In fact, I believe that the way it was given is more of a distraction because they're not mentioning, here's a trivia question, guys. Which non-ally to the West, to the US, UK, Europe, etc., which non-ally to the West has a lot of uranium too? Can anyone name the country? China, right? So just mentioning all these countries and not mentioning that China has a comparable, maybe larger amount of uranium is probably the fugazi, right? Like, I hope the other side doesn't know that China has more uranium. So anyway, like, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that that's an example of use of spec knowledge that might not really be as crucial to the debate, that judges shouldn't be distracted by, right? Like, judges don't credit teams that have the most number of proper nouns and then they win the debate. It's the judicious use of knowledge. Okay, practice 2. Uh-oh. I'm just sending the video over. Okay, some technical difficulties, guys. This might be a little longer than I expected, but practice 2. I'll just explain what's going on. You're gonna watch a first proposition World Schools debate format speaker, and you're gonna be putting those note-taking, paraphrasing skills to the live test. So this speaker will give a standard 8-minute World School speech. Guys, listen, you guys listen. You guys will be writing with your computers. So if you're using devices, your devices, you'll be writing down notes of what the speaker is saying in the same fashion. Remember that here, you don't get a text, right? And there are no subtitles to a speaker. In a debate tournament, you can't turn on the subtitles when someone's debating and they just magically appear in front of the human, right? Like, you can't do that. So there won't be a textual reference. You'll have the visual and audio reference, right? So watch the speaker and apply the same skill. After the speech, you're gonna go back into a new breakout room and you're gonna see if you caught the details. I guess that also means Maya, Alistair, and myself, Jeff, if you're staying, we should be writing down notes about this speech too, okay? So give me a little more time. The video's almost there. Grab a paper and pen if you need it. You guys all have writing utensils? Who's using computer? All right, you using computers? Ethan, you use a pen? Sweet. Sit down straight. Almost there, guys. Oh. It has a solid minute. Jeff, while I still have you here, I know you're going to go soon. Do you have any reminders for the group?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot,
I think we're fine.
What's up?
Reminder about the tournament.
About the tournament, about this workshop, anything? I actually have the video already, so you don't need to give one.
No, but the thing is, a lot of people who sign up for a workshop are not actually judging.
That's fine. You know, we're sharing the knowledge and practice.
Yeah, that's why I don't have reminder. Yeah.
I see. Okay, I'm going to cut this out. Move the video in. All right, so I'm going to play the video, okay? The topic is the same. It's still the nuclear topic. We're only watching one speaker. So let me. All right, this is good. I'm starting it. Everyone get ready. I'm starting in 3, 2, notes at the ready. 1. I'm not replaying it, so pay close attention.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today on the proposition, we are wanting to abandon nuclear power plants. We are going to act as a global organisation to ensure that all countries around the globe decommission their nuclear power stations. We will not be banning them immediately. We understand it takes time. And when we are talking about nuclear power, we are talking about nuclear fission, so the splitting of a radioactive atom to produce energy. This is what is currently going on in the nuclear power stations today. We are not talking about nuclear fusion, which is what goes on in the sun, where you are combining radioactive atoms to produce energy. We are not against the continued research into nuclear fusion. We just want to ensure that it is done in controlled and safe conditions. And now to the model. We are asking countries to not produce any new nuclear power stations. We are asking them to reduce their use and slowly dismantle them over time. We understand that this will take many years, especially in places like France, where they do have a heavy use of nuclear power stations. We are going to ask assistance from the International Atomic Energy Agency, so the IAEA. They're going to oversee it and ensure that it is done, no thank you, it is done safely, and they're going to assist with the costs. There are many replacements to nuclear power, no thank you, such as hydroelectricity, solar power and wind power. The points we're going to make this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, are: nuclear power plants are unsafe. Nuclear waste is damaging to the environment. And my colleague is going to tell you how nuclear power plants come at the cost of not being able to improve on renewable sources. My first point today, ladies and gentlemen, is that power plants are unsafe. There are always going to be risks and consequences associated with nuclear power, and we have recently seen in 2011 the Fukushima disaster, where there was a huge radioactive leak. So what problems are associated with the nuclear meltdown? Well, first of all, there is the immediate explosion, which can kill people in the power plant immediately. Yes.
Isn't the very occasional accident a price worth paying for, like, a constant source of clean, renewable energy?
Actually, on the proposition, we don't think any life is worth losing over helping the environment. Every human life is important to us. So the immediate explosion can cause deaths immediately, and there will also be long-term effects on the environment. We have seen in the 1986 Chernobyl disaster, there were huge medical abnormalities going on in the people immediately surrounding Chernobyl. No, thank you. In Ukraine, for instance, they had a 12% adult medical abnormality rate, which is a lot higher than any other Western country. And there is also the problem of straight after the nuclear meltdown. So, no thank you. People have to go and enter the nuclear power plant to try and stop the reaction. And in the Fukushima disaster, even though they wore hazard suits, no thank you, they showed very significant increases in the radiation in their body, and this would have immediate and long-term effects on them, and we don't think it's fair on the people that have to go into these power plants to try and stop the meltdown.
Point of information?
Yes.
How likely do you think these accidents will be?
Although on the proposition, we do admit that these are rare, however, they are still going on. And considering there are, I think, 465 nuclear power stations at the moment, there have been numerous plants over the past few years that have had problems. And actually, it's not as rare as people think it is, as people believe it to be. So why are meltdowns such a problem? Well, the nuclear fission is a chain reaction, and often these can be uncontrolled. We saw in the 1986 Chernobyl disaster, people were doing tests which ended up not being controlled properly, and that's when... No, thank you. That's when the problem started. And these problems are still continuing today. There have been, as I said, the Fukushima disaster, and these will always continue with nuclear power plants. No, thank you. My second point today, ladies and gentlemen, is that nuclear waste is environmentally harmful. So plutonium is a byproduct in the nuclear fission reaction. And although it can be used again, in other reactions, it is still continually being put in landfill deep underground. And this is a huge problem we feel on the proposition, because often these containers, no thank you, often these containers are not sealed correctly. Often companies cut corners, and especially in less economically developed countries, no thank you, LEDCs, corners can be cut, and radioactive waste can leak into the surrounding water table. No thank you. And so not only will the animals be affected by the radioactive leak, but also the humans will be affected.
Point of information.
No thank you. And even in a more economically developed country, so an MEDC, in America, for instance, they've recently had two radioactive leaks. The first one was in Carlsbad, where there was above ground air contamination, and workers there showed to have respiratory problems for the rest of their life, they believe. No thank you. And also in New Mexico, where they were using cat litter. No, thank you. They were using cat litter to try and help the problem associated with nuclear waste. There was a leak caused by the cat litter, and even in places where they have high safety precautions, they're still shown to be radioactive leaks, which can cause such harmful problems to humans. And on the proposition, we understand that nuclear power plants are generally safe. However, there are always going to be risks associated with them. On the proposition, we feel that the problems associated with a nuclear meltdown are so huge, and we don't feel that it is right that people can lose their lives so easily just so we can have a cheap source of energy. So we ask you to propose this motion.
Okay. So let me get this PowerPoint back.
I did so many typos. I wrote cheap as
It's normal. You can edit it.
I was wrote cheap as.
Okay, so I hope that wasn't too difficult for people, and for us older humans, like that's good practice, I think, for note taking. Let's get into breakout rooms again, and ideally you should be with a different breakout room chief. Okay, so let me set that up. Alistair, I'll just move you to room 2. That way it's easier and people keep the same rooms. Okay. Which means Maya will be in room 1. Okay. And I'm going to open the rooms. You guys could give them a little more time, but not too much. And afterwards, what you're going to do here is just check on what people got. Do you agree on what the main points were? Were there subtleties, like what Maya prefaced, that should have been caught? And this is a good time to flex those recall muscles. Going in 3, 2, go. Okay. They're fine. You guys still have 2 minutes to look at your notes, and I want to hear from Evelyn first, okay? I'm thankful that, what is this? I'm thankful that my computer has enough RAM that it can handle screen share here, screen share there, Zoom, and so many other software at the same time. Is anyone buying the new Macintosh computer? Yeah, they released a new one.
Yeah, but I'm free.
Yeah.
Yes. On for the computers explode.
Don't look for exploding computers. I'm tempted to buy it, but I feel like this is still fine.
Yeah, my every computer is enough. I'm not gonna run like those supercomputer ChatGPT models on my computer.
As long as I can do PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, Spotify, Zoom, Apple screen share, Zoom screen share at the same time, it's still okay.
This is my computer to do like
30 seconds, Evelyn, get ready. Evelyn, you feeling okay there? It's a little dark there. You're not sleepy over there? No. Okay. Vamos. Evelyn. Shh.
In order to build this, we need controlled emissions. And so this will take many years. For example, France doesn't use nuclear as much, so it needs a long time and protective circumstances, which costs a lot. And
Take a pause, take a pause. You need to organize your notes more. It's not about repeating the speech. I'm not testing your memorization. I want to know three things. People, I want three things. What's the government's plan? What was her first main argument? What was her second main argument? Okay? You can reorganize your notes. You can reorganize your notes. Ethan, go. Those three things. What's the plan? The IAEA. The International Atomic Energy Association. Okay.
The first argument is it will be unsafe for people. And the mechanism is Fukushima and no life is worth losing. It will be a leakage of energy sometimes.
Okay.
Even if it is rare, life is not worth it.
Next argument.
Next argument is nuclear waste will harm the environment. The byproduct and they will be done. But it will not be properly sealed. It can leak and harm human and animals and no high-tech reactions to use.
Pretty good, pretty clever stuff. Did anyone catch an argument that hasn't been said by Ethan yet? Aurora. What was what were the main arguments that you caught then? First? Okay. Second? Do not underestimate the nuclear waste problem. Here's a scenario. In 5,000 years, will there still be people?
yeah.
I hope so, I hope so. Do you think in 5,000 years, they will be speaking English or Chinese?
Yeah.
You think so?
Probably Chinese has been around for pretty long.
So you think 5,000 years ago, people in this place in Shanghai were speaking Mandarin, Chinese?
Not actually Mandarin, but like another variant.
My point is, the language that will be spoken 5,000 years from now might not be how we speak today. If we spoke to someone 5,000 years later, do you think we'll understand each other?
Probably a little bit. Probably not. Like, right now, if you talk to someone in the Victorian ages, probably they will use a different slang.
No, it's probably true that we will not be able to verbally communicate. Just like someone who only knows Japanese and someone who only knows Spanish together, no other languages, they will not verbally communicate. But they can still communicate, right?
Yes.
Probably. Probably non-verbally. They can, like what Ethan's doing, waving, beckoning. Where's Daryl going with this? Oh, in 5,000 years, we will still have nuclear waste from 2023. You realize that? Like, the age of nuclear waste to become not dangerous is thousands of years. What if we lost language? How do we warn people 5,000 years from now not to go near it or they'll die? So today, how do we warn people who don't speak English or Chinese how to not go near a nuclear waste site?
Like this.
No, don't come here. No, come on. No, not even a translator. We use what?
Signal.
What signal?
Body language.
No, like a red cross with.
That's not the symbol for nuclear. What's the symbol for nuclear?
Like that, like the full screen, but it would be.
Google it, find it. It's yellow, right? Come on, find it.
Yellow and it's black and like it's.
Right, right. It's the siren with a triangle shape, and it's yellow, and it looks dangerous. And if you spoke Spanish, if you spoke Italian, if you spoke Russian, you saw that, don't go near it, right? In 5,000 years, we need a symbol that will last all the way till then, that people who don't know the language will still understand. The theory goes it might be not a visual symbol. It could be a sound that's so painful that people will not go near that thing. It might be a smell that smells really bad that we put on the nuclear site storage so people don't open it, right? Because it just smells really bad. Something that will repulse us. Yeah. Anyway, Alex, what were your main arguments you captured from there?
Abandon nuclear power plant, radioactives make energy and surely make it controlled and made safe. Nuclear power plants are unsafe and harming to environment risks and there will be consequences. Fukushima radioactive leak, can people and population may go down. Plutonium is an unsafe substance. After company concord, it's gonna be unsafe since it can be.
Very good.
Ukraine has a lot of people affected, significant increase of radioactive results in their bodies. The nuclear fission is a chain reaction.
You're now repeating the speech, okay? You summarize. You don't need all of it. For example, this material she says at the beginning of her speech, Ethan, pick up your body, where she talks about how the sun uses nuclear fusion. Right? Probably not important to the decision of the debate, right? Okay, Evany, what was the plan of this speaker that you were able to capture? What was her plan? What was she gonna do? That's all? There's more to it. What was she gonna replace nuclear reactors with?
Other energies.
Yeah, what were they? Putin's oil? Solar, okay, renewable energy. What, wind energy. That needs to be written down. You need to capture what she is proposing to do instead. The instead section is critical to getting credit because I could stand up if they don't have an instead. If I could stand up if they don't have an instead and say, no nuclear, no power, what are you guys gonna do? And they have a burden on their side of the debate. All right, anything else? No? Okay, the other debaters want some more time. Why don't we jump into Maya's room and hear what she thought? Just let's listen to her.
Nuclear fusion reactions. Oh, hello, Daryl. Only continuing to research fusion reactions should be permitted. So be really careful. Again, this is one of those like subtle distinctions, right? So she's saying we should phase out fission over a long period of time, but research into fusion is still permitted because that's kind of a different, more green version of nuclear power. And then, yeah, there's one paragraph each for these contentions, or sorry, I'm like in PF land where we say contentions. Yeah, nuclear waste, Chernobyl. Yeah, disasters are unplanned and impossible to predict, making them hard to prepare for. Something you might want to include here is that there is that POI talking about the likelihood of examples. So she does kind of say, look, even though like these disasters are not super likely, their magnitude is really high, right? So that's maybe something that you want to point out, right? She's sort of talking about that trade-off between probability and magnitude. So even if they're not super likely, the magnitude is really high. So in some ways, that's like a way of going around the inevitable response of this doesn't happen that often. She's saying, yeah, but when it does happen, it's really bad. So that's enough to justify phasing them out. Then their waste also has negative effects, waste runoff, contaminated environments of people. Yeah, again, I would get really specific here. Like she's talked specifically about water tables being poisoned, about humans and animals being poisoned, because I think like you always kind of want to get down the nuances, because at the point in the debate that you're taking these notes, you don't know what the responses are going to be. So it's entirely possible that there's a response that's like, oh, maybe humans have a way to clean water such that humans aren't going to be affected by this. Say, okay, but animals are affected and that's really bad for all these reasons. So like just getting down, humans and animals are affected. That is like kind of a way of making sure that if that response does come up, you have like the kind of thing that thing is responding to already on your flow. So yeah, I would also, this is a comment for everyone. Oh, thank you, Michael, for sending your thing. A comment for everyone would be to, as much as you can, demarcate each part of the speech, right? So when she's talking about like background issues, sort of say like background issues. When she's talking about the model, say like model at the top of that so that you know which parts of the model. When she's talking, my first point is this, say that. My second point is this, say that. So I think both of these are just kind of like a list of points, but as much as you can, try to differentiate those so that you can really clearly see like where one point ends and where the next point begins. That's like a comment for everyone. Yeah, so then we can move on to Jade. Not banning them immediately, great. Yep, and then I think Jade, nice job getting that distinction between fusion and fission. Yeah, so I think maybe trying to get a few more details about each of the points would be helpful, right? Again, so I think that your summary of like the model and some of the background issues is really good. You get all these distinctions, but again, like just saying nuclear power plants are unsafe, it's damaging to the environment, there could be an immediate explosion that could kill people. Like there are a lot more nuances that the speaker talks about, and maybe even writing down some of those examples is helpful. Or even just kind of like Daryl was talking about before, thinking about as the speaker is giving examples, which examples are really relevant to what she's talking about, right? So she's talking about Chernobyl, she's talking about Fukushima. These are both, I think, very, very relevant. They're like the buzzwords that people always talk about, or I guess whatever the like event equivalent of buzzwords is that people always talk about when they talk about, nuclear power and its dangers. So making sure to mention that. Good, nice noting of medical anomalies, something that would even be better. I'm not sure if this was in your original notes, is noting down that number. I always try to tell people, write down numbers when you can. So I think she says something like 14% increase in medical anomalies, and noting that this is in Ukraine after Chernobyl, right? So like the context behind that increase in medical anomalies, it's not just like increase in medical anomalies. It's like in the location where the nuclear power plant explodes, you do see this increase in medical anomalies by this much, which in the context of like medical anomalies for people who live both near and far from power plants is much higher. Yeah. Okay, great. And then Michael, I'll look at this picture. Okay. Yeah, this is great. So Michael, great job noting down the different points, right? Yeah. So you have demarcated the model, the first point, the second point. So that's excellent. That's something that we should all try to do. That helps really organize your flow, and identify like what the major points are. And this is also going to get more helpful as you move on throughout the debate so that you can note down which arguments have been responded to and which ones haven't. Yeah, just reading through. Yep, great job also noting the each example. So you write down about Carlsbad, you write down about New Mexico, and yep, Fukushima. Yeah, and the dates too. So that's excellent. That's excellent. Like a lot of those nice details, you really want those. So this is really great. Yeah, and also noting down the POIs is good. So I think when we're doing something like just summarizing these for a general audience, noting down like each of the POIs maybe isn't as important, but trying to notice like what the response to the POI is and how that either strengthens or weakens the argument, that can be important. So you don't necessarily have to say there's a POI here, but more say the speaker makes the distinction, even if the likelihood of an explosion isn't high, the magnitude is still really high, and that's enough to justify it. So that's kind of the most information that you need. But yeah, I think great job, everyone. But yeah, major takeaways are make sure to mark each part of the speech, and make sure that you're getting down those events, those examples, and then all of the nuances that are in each speaker's point. Even if you think that they might not be important, they might be important later.
Sounds like you guys had a great time here. Oh, I love it. We'll go back to the room in a minute, unless you guys have questions for Maya. So I'll take my leave from here, but you guys still have a minute or two.
Like a few hours.
Okay, breakout rooms. Okay, so what do I want you guys to do? You can organize your papers so that they're neat. We're going to continue the lecture, and the next drill is pretty intense, so get ready. Hi, Jeff. How was everything there? Hi, Alistair. Alistair, I want you to share some notes from for your observations in your breakout room when everyone's here. I saw Maya's for a hot minute. They had a good time.
Yeah, I think we did pretty well. Everyone was able to identify the most important things. And I think like some of the details were also like identified as well. So it was better than last time where maybe some of the more like detailed things weren't brought out. But yeah, I think overall pretty good.
That's awesome. Okay, everyone's back. I just heard, hey Maya's group. I just heard from Alistair that their session went well, and there was progress in terms of capturing detail. Everyone's back. Okay, so before we move on to the next section, scoring. Jeff, if this was BP, what would you score that speech? Just gut feel.
Just 74 to 75.
Exactly. Like Jeff's mind is where mine is. That I feel is a solid 74. In fact, it's a good case example of sit down. Don't do that. 74. Actually, my opinion is with no chance of getting to 75. Like that's 74 max, min max. It's a good heading. World Schools range for 3-on-3. I think you can minus 7 points from that or something. Jeff, you're more familiar with this. How do you convert a 74 BP to World Schools?
Probably 68.
Probably 68, right? We'll talk about this AdJcore towards the tournament, but I'm leaning to maybe not forcing World Schools scoring ranges and just saying we used a different range, because I think even the AdJcore won't be as confident with the conversion table. We'll talk about that later. For everyone listening, including you guys, that's a solid 74. So that quality of speech, that length is a 74, right, I feel. Because it's perfectly fine for most parts, with some parts that are slightly underperforming and less than persuasive. So no big mistakes, but nothing exceptionally good either. You know what I mean? Like that's where that is. Okay, condensing issues. On the topic of good debating versus bad debating, let's be honest. Most of the debates that you guys will judge and observe for your debate lives will not be your big 81 fights, right? Like these, just mathematically, they're going to be on the average. And in those debates, people might not fully flesh out why one argument is comparatively better than the other. And judges will have to sieve and make assessments and connect the dots, right? Like that is why we're practicing our note taking, so that we can eventually condense issues. Issues are questions that organically come up in the debate as an effect of arguments. So in this nuclear debate, if both sides have opinions on whether it's dangerous to have nuclear reactors around, that's a question that organically came out, right? It naturally came out of the debate, but each side has a different answer to that question. Opposition says that it's not as unsafe as it seems, and government is adamant about it being highly dangerous. So as a judge, once you have notes of both sides of the debate, and from your recall as well, right, from your audio memory besides your notes, you'll be able to find the places where those material, right, rebuttals, arguments, the models on both sides intersect. And it's in those intersections that we can start deciding who wins the debate. Let's go to the next practice. You'll receive a file from me now. Get ready. Where's the chat window? Oh, there you are. Okay. And human beings here, please take one each here. Two pages. Oh, 3 pages, I guess. 3 pages with one blank page. Okay, so people with me digitally, you'll receive in practice 3 a more fleshed out segment of the debate. So on the left side, you'll see government material. On the right side, you'll see opposition material, proposition material, opposition material. Okay, so you can now start seeing where these speakers have rebuttals and arguments that interact. And those interactions generate issues. Hi, Stacy. Could you go to page 2 of that document and read out to me what are the 2 issues that are suggested there? Or you don't have the file, Stacy? Oh, you can't hear me. Is something wrong? Sylvia, could you help me? Could you read the 2 issues in page 2?
Sure. So page 2.
Yeah.
The first one is, are nuclear power plants safe? And the second one is, where are people's life improved?
Okay, so thank you, Sylvia. Like, these are suggestions of where the issues could go. Here's your next practice. Using only the material on that page, okay? So don't bring in outside material, guys. It applies to you. Don't bring in outside material from what you know about nuclear power plants, just that material. Start summarizing and paraphrasing which of that material is relevant for each issue, and decide who won those 2 issues, proposition or opposition, right? So we're beginning the judging process. Here it's easier because we've pick the issues out for you. So all that it takes now is reading and the judge work. But in practice number 4, you're going to generate the issue yourself. So let's take practice now and do it in this safe place. Okay, so the reading starts now. Reading, I think you could finish this in 7 minutes. Actually, no, let me accommodate for people who read differently. 10 minutes. Please read through the material in 10 minutes, and then I'll put you in breakout rooms. Today. 5 minutes, guys. If actually we're done sooner, we could go, but let's give the whole 5 minutes. Okay, let's try to save time. We'll move into breakout rooms now, but if you're still reading, keep reading. Okay. Let's actually keep the last grouping. So I'll just open the rooms. What are you gonna do when you get into the rooms? When you enter the breakout rooms, your breakout room chief might ask you to start giving your observations on what proposition said about issue 1, what opposition said about issue 1, and then issue 2 the same. Start reaching a consensus about who the breakout room feel is winning either issue. I don't expect that all rooms will come to the same call. Maybe some rooms think prop wins or op wins, right? So don't worry about the uniformity of the call, but I want you to practice that recall, right? I want you to practice that memory muscle flex so that we're able to adapt that into this activity. Breakout rooms now. How dramatic. Okay, human beings. Aurora first. Aurora, who is winning the first issue? Why? What did they say? Why? What did Op say? Why was it not enough? Both sides, go. Mm-hmm. It's okay, going. So the risk is smaller, Op said, but why was that not enough? Mm-hmm. How did you resolve that? So Op says that the technology means people won't die, and Gov says that they will die. What convinced you that they will die? Aurora. It was because they gave you examples of where it happened that convinced you? It's hard because Op gave you a reason for why it's not true. Maybe that's a better question. Why was the Op saying that there are technological improvements not enough to convince you? Let me see. Did they not talk about Japan? Isn't argument 1 about Japan as safe? Argument 1 on opposition. I'll let Aurora think about this more. I'm not saying your answer is wrong, right? I'm just saying if I'm the debater and I'm listening to you give me the decision, I'll feel pretty bad. I'll feel it's not fair, Alex, who's winning the first issue on are they safe?
I feel like it's
Okay, Gov is winning. Same as Aurora. Why?
Because they gave a lot of evidence how nuclear power plants how they harm people that live near it, and then they gave a lot of examples like Chernobyl and.
I told you to stop doing that with your chair. Get up. Are you okay? Excuse me, Alex. It's not your fault. Ethan, are you injured?
No.
Can you stand?
Yeah.
Stand for 10 minutes. Go.
Okay. And also just so they used Chernobyl and Fukushima and as evidence and examples to show us how nuclear power plants can be unsafe.
That's what Aurora says. So why did that sway you more than Op? Is it just the number of examples?
Because Op, instead of saying about nuclear power plants, instead they said more about how general how government does with other issues.
Like refrigerators, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you guys are still behind, and not behind them, okay? Behind in the convincing process, because you're not showing me why the Op explanation of technology improving is inadequate. Here's an example of what you can say. If I were you, I would say something to the effect of, Opposition mentioned technology would improve and gave an example of when technology improved, but never really explained what about the technology improved. It could have been luck. While government has shown, in spite of technical improvements, there will always be a what, Aurora? Yeah, that is an explanation that shows why op isn't convincing you. Remember, when you're judging, you are not coming to a mathematical answer. You are convincing a loser of a debate, not a loser in life, okay? A loser of a debate, that they deserve not to win. And with debaters, everyone thinks they win all the time, you know? Like, everyone thinks they're always winning every debate. So the pressure on you to deliver a convincing reason for why they shouldn't win is on. Ethan, who won the second issue?
I think, I'm not really sure, but I think Gov won on the third.
Explain.
Because like Gov explains the health issue between if the radio breaks it when it changes to renewable energy, it will make people's health like better because we don't use unnatural artificial waste. The environment and nature protected. I think it way over the opposite side of like it is economic benefits on cheaper electricity.
Okay.
Versus that you can be not sick very time. You can be very wealthy, or you can buy it in a very cheap price. But if you are unhealthy and you're sick all the time, it's still not worth it.
Interesting. That's a great answer. You still have to stand. But that's a great answer, which is those benefits that opposition mentions of how your life is not as hard because of the cheaper electricity aren't worth it if you're going to have to live through it sick. So he made the comparison, and I could believe that. I could say, yeah, my team worked hard in showing the better refrigerators and the developing nations get to improve their economies, but I guess we didn't really show why that development was more important than avoiding the health hazard. Like, maybe I could buy that. Evany, who won the second issue? Come on, it's time. You can't not know, it's right in front of you.
I choose to choose no.
I'll give you time. Evelyn?
I think government won.
Like what Ethan said, why?
First, because government was talking about the nature of life, but was talking about the quality of life and people, and then it says that it produces like a circumstance, which is like I think is like some point like agreeing to go.
How? Explain.
Yeah, and then it says that there are still currently fewer than 100 deaths, which is still deaths. Yeah. And then it agrees with the like endangered the lives of, and it says that it improved immensely. The problem is still improving, not solved.
So opposition does not give enough rebuttal to why the problem is actually resolved. Yeah. It's also an acceptable answer. I think that you guys are doing quite well here. So Evany, before I move on, you need to give me both issues. Who won the first? Who won the second? First. Start with the first issue. Who won the first issue? Why? Explain. Don't ask me. Give me the decision.
I want to see how I don't want to see why it's like nuclear power is safe, I want an argument about why it's better for people to have the risk and to continue this.
Where did you hear that? That's great. Did you hear what Evan just said? Like, it's not a question of whether it's safe alone. It's a question of whether it's better than the alternatives. When government presents what alternative though? What?
Like, it is not safe.
What alternative does government present though? You're not Evany. What will they generate power with instead of nuclear reactors on renewable energy? That is also pretty merited. All right, you guys have warmed up. Okay, you sit down. Okay, you sit down straight. Okay, you can take a washroom break. That's been a while. When you come back, we're gonna move on to the next activity. I'm gonna keep doing this workshop, by the way, humans. Guys, I'm talking to you before you go. I'm gonna keep doing this workshop until 5. So it's almost 4. You can go at 4 and bring these sheets, or you could stay until 5 and enjoy the rest of the workshop. Up to you. Ethan, you don't need a washroom?
No.
Okay. Hello. Okay, let's go to final notes here. Look at the paper, Ethan. Look at the paper as I give comments out loud. Look at that model, right? First proposition model. That electric cars thing with Biden is his anti-Putin strategy, which in a way China and Xi Jinping's policy cooperate with. What is it? When Putin decided that Ukraine invasion had to happen and stuff, right? Did China send soldiers to help Russia? No. In fact, China says that they're going to be helping Russia as a friend, but they haven't militarily joined the fight like America, right? One of the ways that China and the US actually cooperated with Biden's plan to stop Russia from being as powerful and manipulative with this was electric cars. So Xi Jinping and the Biden administration have both rolled out massive discounts to buy electric cars. In Shanghai, how does that happen? In Shanghai, if you want to buy a car and it's an electric car, it's a lot cheaper. Did you know that? Like, it's a lot cheaper than a petroleum car. And that's because of the Russia situation. If more Americans and Chinese drivers drive electric vehicles, there is less need to import what? Right, from Russia, from Saudi Arabia. It's energy import dependence becomes less of a factor. Like, that's what it means. Do you see that? What about the op model? Look at that op model. Is there anything special with that model? Look at it. Oh, we already saw it. The special thing is the population. Alex, what is the special thing with population in that op model? You've seen it twice now. Go ahead. Yeah. Op model, first opposition model. Alex forgot. Evany, what is special with first opposition, the model there? The population thing, how is it related? Yes, Ethan. Right, we'll only build it for when society's populations are growing, right, expanding. Yeah, you know what else? If I were to choose here, I'll explain how I weighed the issues, right? On the first issue about nuclear power plants being safe, what I would say is government probably won because in the effort opposition took to show technology is improving, like what I told them, I do not see what those technological improvements are. So opposition is arguing by providing me with an example, but not explaining the example. They said Japan has developed its nuclear safe guardrails so that the disaster isn't as bad, right? But it could be a factor of luck. And we don't really know if it was really the guardrails that did the protection. How might opposition resolve that? If opposition focus wanted to win based on that piece of analysis, they need to say, look, the technology that's improving is deliberately the shielding of the nuclear waste area. If that shielding is closer to the level of lead, that means even if there's a meltdown, it would not damage the integrity of the shield, then that shield could just, very well protect the waste from spreading. Something like that, right? Basically, the mechanism for why that technology is better. For issue number 2, I could even say op 1, because while proposition says you can never agree to putting yourself in danger and living beside a nuclear reactor in a fair way, you can never say yes to that kind of deal. Opposition shows specific ways on how people's lives improve and how really poor people's lives improve a lot. Do you see that? So between proposition and opposition, opposition has more specific explanation. Finally, however, I can also say, even if opposition wins a second issue, proposition might win the whole debate. Why? Why? Think. Because why is that issue more important than the second? That's acceptable. Or the way I like phrasing it is because if human beings had rights, like all these 100 rights, those rights are not flat. There are some rights that are higher than others. So your right to economic flourishing, your right to a quality of life where you're not hungry or suffering is lower than your right to what? Your right to life. And that closes here. Hi, guys. Some of you back. Are you back? Okay. Are any of you guys staying for the rest? I'm going to go until 5 o'clock for this. Or are you guys going in at 4? You could stay, okay? You could say if you want. You don't have to, though. Okay, so what are we doing next? some reminders. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So number one, don't wait for the debaters to give you the issues. Remember that debaters are obviously biased. They want to win the debate, right? So if they want to win the debate, they're not going to give you the objectively important issues that naturally happened. They're going to give you the issues that they believe, if you think about, will make them win. So if I were opposition in this debate that you just saw, I'd likely tell you that the most important issues are the ones that relate to practical improvements to people's lives. Because if I believe that those were important issues, more than the right to life or security or safety, I might make you win the debate, right? So don't believe the debaters as a source, primary source of what the issues are. They're allowed to make their case. Debaters are allowed to offer their case in a manner that earns the win and nudges the issues. But you as a judge should be crafting those issues as the debate goes on, right? Don't wait till the end of the debate or for debaters to tell you what they are. Next, winning an issue here requires comparison and weighing, and some debaters are not going to do that for you. So some debaters might fail to offer you their weighing or comparison. There is a bad judge trend of, if there is no weighing or comparison, or if there's one, you automatically just give them a win because they offered a comparison rather than actually comparing and weighing yourself, right? There is a level of judgment that you exercise as a judge. So here's a radical example. If the debate was this nuclear power debate and proposition says that nuclear power, once removed, will allow for a flourishing of animal rights, and specifically the right of the hairy crab to live or something like that. And there is a lot of rebuttal and argument everywhere. And one comparison of why the hairy crab being a vulnerable species means that it deserves protection, and that's a comparison. While in opposition, you have real argumentation about people living difficult lives. It is absurd for a judge to, at the end of the debate, say, because proposition offered a weighing of why crabs are vulnerable, but op doesn't argue why the people are vulnerable, then prop should win, right? Like there's a ridiculousness to that. So exercise your judgment. Do not allow debaters to manhandle your brain just because of comparisons like that. Like it's a little radical, but yeah. How do you avoid that? You avoid that by doing what we're doing today, by having clear note-taking and recall so that you can see the debate. Let's go to the next practice. Practice 4. I hope you didn't delete your notes from the previous debate with the first prop, because what we're gonna do now is, and you guys will watch this debate too, you're not leaving yet, you will watch this second speaker, the first opposition speaker of the same debate. And at the end of that, while you're watching, you're taking notes. At the end of that, you will first make the issues of this exchange of two debaters, like what were the issues that came up, and decide who won the issues that you found, right? So first you're gonna find the issues that came up as a result of the two people debating, and then you're going to decide who won the issues that came up. Okay, so that's what we're doing now. Again, a little work, Maya and Alistair, like you'll need to take notes for the speaker too, because this begins the process. Everyone else, remember, there are no subtitles here. You have no textual reference. You need to practice those note-taking muscles. Let's go. Playing in 3, 2, go.
you
Sorry,
guys
I
have
can't hear
sound?
any sound.
I don't have sound.
Check what's going on.
We don't have sound.
Yeah, my bad. Okay, I'm gonna replay. You'll need sound.
Can we take a break for like 2 minutes? Start.
We can't break, so we're running out of time. But you can turn your camera off and continue listening. Sorry about that.
All right.
Okay.
To wastefully and recklessly. It wouldn't make sense to wastefully and recklessly step out of the nuclear age at a time when it brings such benefits to humankind. On the opposition today, we stand for the sensible implementation and building of nuclear plants across the world, in line with the recommendations of the International Atomic Energy Authority. We think such an organisation is capable, ladies and gentlemen, of maintaining quality standards to ensure that any accidents are minimalised without decommissioning every single plant and wiping back years of progress that has been good in general for society. Today, we're going to tell you how it'd be a massive waste to decommission these plants, how it'd be bad for the environment overall, and how actually what this does is it actually complements rather than outcompetes renewable energy sources. I'm going to focus on the first two of those points and my partner on the third. Before I move on to my two substantives, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about some rebuttal in the response to the material that we get from opening prop. So the first thing they tell us is that there's a massive danger associated with using nuclear energy. We tell you that actually these accidents that happen are rare. They don't happen particularly often. And we tell you that actually these kind of accidents, in the same way that we still fly on planes, despite the fact that there are occasional accidents in planes, we should still continue to use this energy, because such accidents are exceptionally rare. Furthermore, in the events where these accidents happen, it's also incredibly unlikely to result in the loss of life. We point to the example of the United States of America, where in the last 20 nuclear accidents, none of them have resulted in the loss of human life. We see that actually accidents that happen with regards to the nuclear power, they very rarely happen, and when they do, they very rarely result in the loss of life. And it's right that we continue to use them and work on trying to improve the safety of them rather than scrapping them altogether, because that's ultimately the same as trying to scrap air travel because occasionally a plane crashes. It just doesn't make any sense. So it's rare and it doesn't happen. We also see that actually it constantly improving the nuclear power sector is constantly evolving itself to minimalise any threats. If any mistakes do happen, right, what happens is they're improved, they're looked over to ensure they don't happen again. It can only get safer with time, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't make to scrap it at a time when they're safer than ever. So the second thing they tell us is that nuclear waste is damaging. We said actually there are precautions in place to ensure that nuclear waste, the damage caused by it, is minimalised. For example, they're buried miles below the ground, they're sealed in concrete containers, and they're made sure they're disposed in places that are safe. We tell you if this organisation that they keep talking about is capable of disposing of every single nuclear power plant, it's probably likely that they're capable also of ensuring that safety standards are also maintained. And it makes actually a lot more sense on our side of the house to continue to make sure that this remains as safe as possible, rather than doing the quite dangerous and arduous task of removing every single power plant. That to us just doesn't seem viable. So on to my substantive. We think that actually by scrapping this, it would be a massive waste to everyone. We see that nuclear power is something that applies to all different countries, from the less economically developed countries to the more economically developed countries. With the less economically developed countries like India and Tunisia, they're building a foundations of a thriving economy on the nuclear sector. And it's a viable source of energy, because unlike things like coal and oil, they're not going to run out, and they're going to be continued to be used, and they don't damage the environment. They're able to build a sustainable economy in this sector on those areas. In the same way that countries like France, a more economically developed country, bases 75% of its energy output on the nuclear sector. It just doesn't make sense to waste all this time and money by scrapping it on the basis that occasionally an accident happens. The thing about nuclear power is it has a high initial capital outlay, so it costs a lot of money to make. But actually to maintain it, it doesn't cost very much money at all. So you actually need to spend quite a long time before you make that money back. What they're proposing today would strip millions of companies that have set up these nuclear power plants of their money. And what
Bit
does
of
this lead to?
information?
It leads to them trying to find an alternative source of energy that can make them money even more quickly. The only alternative source of energy other than nuclear power plants that's viable and actually produces reliable energy is fossil fuels. We see that actually this will lead to an increase in fossil fuels, not a decrease. And this is backed up by evidence, right? For example, between the years 2007 and 2013 within the UK, as nuclear power decreased, coal increased because it's the only viable source. Why is this? Because ultimately the renewable sector has not yet fully developed and the energy it produces isn't plentiful and it isn't reliable. So we see that ultimately what they're producing removes the only viable and clean alternative to this kind of energy. So that's a bad thing because that leads to an increase. So on to my next point about the impacts this will have on the environment. There are two causes of environmental damage, ladies and gentlemen, that we would categorise. First of all, local damage, and secondly, global warming. We see with local damage, you get damages to one or more ecosystems that have minimal effects on the animals and people around them. Yes, the effects aren't pleasant, but ultimately it has little impact on the rest of the world as a whole. The second is global warming. Global warming happens and the change happens gradually. The effect is more obvious. Like, for example, in the last year, we've seen an average global increase in the temperature by 1 degree, but the chances are that'll have an effect that really damages a lot of people's lives due to rising sea levels. We see that it's local damage that's sustained occasionally by the use of nuclear energy, and it's global warming that happens as a result of the use of fossil fuels. And we say it's actually a lot more damaging global warming because it affects more people, because the effects are more gradual, and because the effects are more severe. We ultimately think that any sector that produces something that will have less of an impact is the more viable one, and in this case, it's nuclear energy. So we see that ultimately the effects nuclear energy will have are limited, and therefore it's right we continue in this way. And ultimately what they're proposing is not a viable alternative. So what does this mean? Well, since global warming is more damaging than local damage, and since nuclear activity slows down global warming because it actively helps this thriving sector rather than preventing to quell it, in return for possible damage occasionally to local, which is rare and less significant when it actually happens, we think ultimately nuclear power is more sufficient and more viable, and it's a viable and the only viable alternative to fossil fuels, and should not be abandoned as a result of this. So ladies and gentlemen, because we think ultimately it would be a massive waste of time and money to do this, and because it would be bad for the environment, not good for the environment, we beg you to oppose the motion.
Okay. All right, so you take 3 minutes to make your notes, and I'll put you guys in breakout rooms. Let's go. One minute, I'm arrange breakout rooms now. We'll just do a quick swap between Maya and Alistair. That way people could go to the same room. Okay. Going once, going twice. All right, breakout rooms are opening now. Same process. So remember, there are no issues yet. Don't go to the sheet and just say the issues are the same as 1 and 2 here, okay? That's not it. It may be different. Go. Who was winning this exchange? Do you think it was the first speaker on prop or the op speaker? Ethan, who's winning? Sit down properly. Well, maybe you could start. What were the two issues that you found?
I think it is whether there is any other alternatives to the energy and whether it is safe.
Interesting. Interesting. What were the two issues you found, Alex?
So the two.
Bye-bye, bye-bye.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, let's work with what Ethan said. So alternatives. I think that you guys can agree that that was an issue. I don't know if it's the most important one. Evany, what did proposition say about alternatives to nuclear energy? What did opposition say about alternatives to nuclear energy? Keep your sheets. Ethan, start the ball rolling, and then listen to Ethan so you can contribute. Go, Ethan.
Okay. Well, Gus said that renewable energy, if it is established, to create a cleaner, more sustainable, and like not dangerous source of energy. This is of course good, but like optional I think like yes, it will be good, but if you cannot establish it without the nuclear plant, coal and fossil fuel will just go back, and the renewable energy will never be established, and will not be achieved, and then the nuclear power is the only other source.
Yes, Evany, what else do you contribute to that question? So Ethan's already set it up that the alternatives that propositions say are present were mentioned, like solar and wind. Opposition made direct points about how it's not enough and showed evidence of such. What do you think of those two? Who's winning? Why? So they were directly responsive. Alex, what about you? Who is winning that issue? If you want to stay in my room, you got to contribute.
I would say probably government.
Because what?
Because they told more about how these, like how they expanded, like how how it can become like sound.
Bye, Evelyn.
So government may expound a lot. May actually had a lot of evidence and examples on how this can should be like.
Okay, here's what I think, okay, about the alternatives issue. I think this is an example of a deadlock. It's an issue which neither side won. Why? I feel that proposition gives good information and planning about what the renewable sources are, why they're cleaner, why they're better. Opposition gives sound, right? I wouldn't say excellent, but sound rebuttal about how it doesn't generate enough power with an example. It might seem initially that opposition should win because they responded, right? But that's an unfair way to judge the debate, because of course opposition will reply. They come after. You can't just make them win because they came after. Here's the thing. I think that without error, without being forced, opposition forgets to explain why nuclear is a better alternative, even if they show that those alternatives might not be as efficient. How do you prove that nuclear is a better alternative? Right, the material on the paper, right? Which he wasn't talking about, right? You get that? So that's why I think that they're probably a deadlock. It doesn't mean that Gov wins, because Gov should have anticipated and prepared material about why their alternatives can produce enough energy. That's the responsibility. So neither of them win. We can go to the second issue, which is, and Alex start the ball rolling with this. Who won the issue on safety? Why? Explain.
Because Gov said about how like examples of past histories were you like well disasters and stuff.
You can't say you don't know how to. That's very bad judging. Come on.
And like you also said about leaks and also like
Okay, so you appreciated the explanations of past tragedies.
yeah.
And compared to opposition, why wasn't opposition enough?
Because all the opposition they did not give as much examples and instead we talk more about other kinds of energy that can be used.
Fantastic. That's fine. That's a good start. Ethan.
I think also the both honors and reason. All did like I think a good job on like it said first where accident and compared it to claims and also give an example about the environmental like law. But their last rebuttal that is they can minimize the problem. I don't think it really stands due to like that even if like many great countries with fully developed economic abilities, they still fail to communicate completely. So I think last rebuttal failed.
Okay.
But on the previous, the weighing is like they rebutted why like, there may not be the physical harms and if it is not nuclear reactions, like this rebuttal works, but it is nuclear reactions and they haven't rebuts the like the argument on environment. Even if there's no death caused, it will make like the area like kind of uninhabitable and animals and plants in the region will die, not just the people.
Okay. Evany, do you have other ways to weigh that out? And safety, who won? Gov or up?
No, but I think decision has less comparative.
Yeah, so I think what happened here, especially op speaker under time, they didn't fill the time. It's an 8-minute speech and they only filled 6:30. So that doesn't mean that they should lose, okay? Under time doesn't mean you should lose, but it does mean that you probably haven't given as much material as your opponent. My gut feel about this exchange is op is defensive, meaning op is reacting to the Gov claims. Gov is saying it's going to be deadly. Op is showing how it's not as deadly. Gov is saying renewables work. Op is saying renewables aren't enough. So it's very reactionary. There is no dedicated, individual, positive argument about why nuclear is good. And that's why they feel like they're on the back foot in this situation. Okay, so that's it for this section. We're gonna go listen into the other humans, okay?
That even economically developed countries like the USA have leaking problems. Opposition replies by saying that they're buried and sealed in safe places. And, when I hear safe places, I hear that as being places where people who don't matter live. And so I don't really find this to be an effective rebuttal. I would give this one to proposition. And then on the impact of nuclear power plant use,
I can't hear you anymore. Sorry, Michael. I can't hear you. Your sound cut off after you explained.
I had arguments that were more impactful and they won more of the arguments. So my decision was off.
Yeah, I couldn't hear anything you said after you explained why the op rebuttal to nuclear waste is ineffective.
Okay.
Your sound kind of cut off.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So my the third clash I thought was on the impact of the nuclear power plant use. And basically, I thought that the opposition argument was stronger, looking at the localized impact of a nuclear power plant disaster versus the alternative to nuclear power plants being fossil fuels and that having a greater global impact. I thought that would be a bit greater impact. And so that gave that to op. And so I thought the two more important clashes went to op and that one of the less important clashes went to prop. So I voted op.
Cool. I just want to make a few general comments and then we can discuss like the issues that were present in this round, which is first, the way we look at whether or not a team proves something to a sufficient extent is not through their use of examples or how many examples they used. It's more, if they used examples, do those examples actually contribute to our like understanding of whether or not something is true? And if they don't use examples, that's not necessarily bad either, because without examples, you can still prove through logic why something is going to be true. So you can kind of prove the likelihood that something is going to be true, even if you don't have actual examples to back it up. Second comment, I think, is you shouldn't really intervene in the debate. So if a certain team says something, but the other team didn't point out why this was wrong, you don't automatically tell yourself, this was wrong because I think so, or this was wrong because in my lived experience, I have seen this happen and it was wrong. So you should evaluate the debate as it happens. You should evaluate the debate as teams present their material and not without any intervention from any like outside knowledge that you have about the round or like any pre-existing biases that you might have towards this issue. So, okay, Jade, and you can also like tell us which issues you think might be more effective. Like you can participate in this part as well. So I think the issues that Ryan brought up, you said the first is whether nuclear power is worth it. The second is whether nuclear power is dangerous. I think, Michael, your issues were slightly different because you broke the danger of nuclear power down into the likelihood and the danger of nuclear waste. The likelihood of having accidents happen and the danger of nuclear waste. I think these probably could be condensed into what Ryan said, which is like one issue about whether or not having nuclear power is dangerous. Whether or not the risk of nuclear power is worth it. Let me see. I do think the material discussed under this clash was quite important because opposition had quite a large push on whether or not it's going to be a waste to like just scrap nuclear development altogether and why this is going to be harmful for the environment. But I think the way we can look at this is, wait, give me a second. I think the way we can look at this is the impact on the environment, as opposed to like the other clash, which mostly discusses like the impact on humans. So the reason I would say this is because the PM did have an entire argument about how it's going to be damaging to the environment, right? A large part of LO's push about why this is going to be a waste and why this is going to impact the environment. Like both of these arguments still also talk about the environment, even if like the argument title was the waste to decommission. And then also a large part of the argument about why it's a waste to like decommission nuclear power plants was that you're just going to have people burning more fossil fuels overall. So I think that this is quite an important issue, like whether or not scrapping nuclear power plants damages the environment.
Test, 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 test. It's voluntary. It's voluntary. The next activity is not complex. Next activity, we are going to watch the whole debate, the rest of the speakers, and then judge that debate. You've watched 2 speakers, right? There are 2 more, and you're going to judge who won, Gov or Op. That's the last one, and we're done. You can rest now. You have 1 minute to rest. Test, 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 test. Okay, everyone is back-ish. There you go. Okay, okay. So we've reached the final activity. Oh my gosh, like I'm applauding for all of you. You got to the end of the workshop. Now each of you get to go home with the brand new car. Wait, this is not Oprah. Different show. Okay, final activity. Oral ad rehearsals, or at least we'll try to get to that point. Very simple. We're going to watch the rest of this nuclear debate. I know you're sick of it already. You've had the afternoon of it. In real life, you have 1 debate, 1 judgment of it, but it's a workshop. We're going to watch the next 4 speakers. Second prop and op, third proper op, essentially a deputy and a whip speech, if you're familiar with other formats. You should be taking notes as well. And you'll be applying what we've done in both sections, effective note-taking and condensing issues to the whole side. So instead of it being done to 2 speakers, to both sides, and then assess without replies, we'll skip the replies, who won each issue and eventually who wins the debate, prop or op. Okay, so without further ado, does anyone have questions? Anyone want to voice something out? Maya, any other observations you want to voice out before we start this?
Not really. I guess, do you want me to like recap some of the main issues that we talked about?
Before the last activities.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I think the biggest piece of feedback is like not just enumerating the main voting issues, but also trying to justify the order that you put them in, right? To try and say, okay, here are the main issues. Here's why I think this is the most important issue. Here's why I think this is the second most. And here's why I think this is the third most. Because like each issue receives a different amount of weight depending on how important you think it is. So justifying why, you feel most comfortable voting on the first issue can be really important to debaters. And also going into different amounts of detail when you signpost and recap both sides, kind of general argumentative thrust, versus talking about these specific arguments in the context of each voting issue. So maybe going into more detail when you're talking about the most important issues and less detail when you're talking more generally about what both sides argue.
That, Maya. Let's go into I'll give you guys a bit of a personal story before we go to the final activity related to what Maya just said. So I'm much older than all of you, but in that age, over 15 years of debating, I've adjudicated and been selected into the panels of at least the semifinals of the world's largest tournaments, including the World Championship. And to reach that seniority globally, when I was at your capacity, right, when I was younger, I was always afraid of that bad feedback I would get if I messed up an oral adjudication. I was afraid that even if I gave a good oral adjudication, would teams, feel like it was inadequate? Would they think that I was unfair? And then poof, there goes your reliability to be allocated into those dream panels, right? Like that's always on the back of your head, right? Like it's honestly, everyone goes through that. So you're not alone. But your best way of avoiding that from ever affecting you, from ever affecting your performance, besides being objective all the time, is put yourself in the shoes of someone who's lost that debate. And how would you want it to be explained to you why it wasn't your time to win? It's a conversation. You're not looking for a programming code that unlocks yes, no heartache for a debater, right? Like it's a conversation. So make sure that as you organize your issues and you're commanding the authority of the room, that you're talking to a human being that lost and showing the adjudication in a manner that empathizes with that understands, yeah, you did talk from first op about how there is a limited generation of energy from renewable sources, and so it's incomparable to supply the country. But eventually, even if I did appreciate that, you weren't able to comparatively demonstrate why nuclear as an alternative is better independently. Like they want to hear that you listened to the point. They want to hear that they had a fighting chance. And if you do that for every OA that you give, I have no doubt you guys will judge the finals of the World Championship too one day. Just keep your heart into it. Let's go to the final activity.
Thank you, first opposition, for that speech. So to continue the case for the proposition, I call on the second proposition speaker.
The abandonment of nuclear power from the world as a whole would lead to a better future for the human race and also a better future for the environment. At the beginning of my speech today, I'm going to talk about the mistakes that the opening opposition speaker made when he spoke about nuclear power. So firstly, he stated that it was a waste of money to remove these nuclear power plants. But as my partner said, we would do this slowly so that they could get some benefit out of the nuclear power plants that they still have, but while removing them and having the greater good for the future. Additionally, in the long run, and I'm sure the opposition will agree, the best source of energy for the world as a whole is renewable energy. So in the long run, with the removal of nuclear power, we would actually save the money. Finally, we see that doing the right thing for the world as a whole and for the environment comes at a cost of money, which we see that most countries should be more than willing to pay. Additionally, on the point of the reduction of greenhouse gases, the opposition has seen this debate as a point of the lesser of two evils. We say that we should not use nuclear power or coal. We say that we should switch to renewable energy and put more emphasis on the development of it so that we can rely on it in all parts of the world equally, in a more sustainable fashion. Why? Because simply it has absolutely no tax on the environment around it. It uses the things that are already there and that humans have been ignoring for centuries, and using things that damage the world in local and global ways, such as global warming. Additionally, on the idea of nuclear accidents, the opening opposition brought up the idea that the US have had, I believe it was 30 nuclear incidents, and there have been no major accidents. However, the US is an MEDC. It is more economically developed. It's got better safety precautions as it can afford to. In areas which are newly industrialising and in ones that are lesser developed, it's harder to get those safety precautions with a limited budget. No, thank you. And although in an ideal world, every nuclear power plant in the world will be completely safe, it isn't. Steps take slowly over time to develop, and eventually then we would have a safe nuclear, no thank you, a way of using nuclear power. However, for the cost of lives that come between that time and for the damage to the environment, we do oppose. Additionally, on the idea of dealing with waste, we do say that this encourages landfill culture. No, thank you. As the majority of nuclear waste is stored underground, even though it may be surrounded by masses of concrete, this does still encourage the idea that we can simply remove a problem by burying it underground. This has negative implications on recycling as a whole. Now on to my main point for you today. Now, my point is about how investment in nuclear power comes at a price to the development of renewable energy. Yes.
If it's only less economically developed countries that are at risk of a nuclear disaster, why are you proposing a global ban that includes the more economically developed countries that you said aren't at risk?
Thank you. Well, firstly, we see that these things do happen in more economically developed countries, such as Japan with Fukushima, and I was simply taking your example that you had, which is why we should keep it as a whole, even though there are dangers in other parts of the world that you seem to have ignored. Now on to my main point today. So firstly, we see that there should be more money going to renewable energy, as currently there are large amounts being invested in nuclear power, as it is seen as the best viable solution in comparison to coal. But we don't see that we should be balancing these two things. We should say that renewable energy transcends these two ideals and is better than both combined. We think that 100% renewable is the future for the planet, and the sooner we get to it, the better we will be as a global society. So firstly, we see that there are developments towards a fully renewable Earth. Firstly, in New England, there has been the development of one of the largest renewable energy power stations on the entire planet. And this renewable energy isn't just being used in more economically developed countries. Newly industrializing countries such as China have developed the Three Gorges Dam, which is a massive hydroelectric power station. No, thank you. In India, the Sombar Lake solar farm is currently being developed for the price of around $4 billion.
Point of information.
No, thank you. These are positive movements from not necessarily the richest countries in the world to develop renewable energy as a whole, which can benefit everybody on the planet. So we also say that we admit fully that renewable energy is far away from cost efficiency. This is a natural thing that we have to take on board as it is newly developing. Unfortunately, not enough of the world uses it to be thought of as this viable source that's the opening opposition spoke about. With more development and more investment as something like this that can benefit the planet as a whole deserves, we see that it can become what it needs to be. Yes.
You've just told us about how renewable energy is being improved upon in MEDCs and LEDCs. Is this not sufficient evidence that there is currently development going on in renewable energy?
But as I just stated, there is still a large place to go before it's fully cost efficient, which is what the world needs. Though there are movements being made by countries like China and India, the world over needs to wake up and smell the roses and realise that in the future, the only thing that we can lead at Earth which is fully sustainable is renewable energy, as even nuclear itself will run out with more and more pressure on it from more and more countries. And then the thing that the world has been relying on will cease to exist, which will then lead to massive energy shortages in the period where they then start to develop renewable energy more, which is at the point where they could have done it now. So why do we see that the investment of nuclear power is so important? So firstly, what we see is that any good investing needs public support. It needs people to see that renewable energy is the way forward as opposed to nuclear energy. If the public think that nuclear energy is going to last forever, then they're simply wrong. It will not last forever, and the only thing that can is renewable energy. And I apologise for the reiteration, but it is one of the strongest points in this debate. Simply, the way that the world works is that science has to go further and further, and by simply sticking with what we have, which is fission, even if we slowly develop the health and safety standards of it, we're going to reach a point where we have to stop, and that is going to leave the rest of the world in a place of almost purgatory where they can't change anything. So this development of nuclear power can come at the cost of renewable energy. if countries can afford nuclear power, then they can also afford to develop renewable energy. However, countries like France, as they're now beginning to run over the majority of their country's power by nuclear energy, can seem to forget about this. These are big countries that are fully powerful economically and can help push the rest of the world forward, which they can forget about when they're caught up in this sort of idea. So on this, lastly, to talk about the idea of rebuild, which is what needs to happen. There needs to be a refiguration of what the world looks for in energy. Though we agree with the opposition that we should no longer be using fossil fuels, we also disagree with the use of nuclear power. So what have I told you today? I've told you today why simply a lot of the ideas about nuclear accidents and additionally wasting money don't really stand in a case of the opposition. Additionally, why scrapping nuclear power and making renewable energy is something that's used the world over is the most important thing for the planet as a whole. Thank you.
I'd now like to welcome the second speaker for the opposition.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to be telling you why actually we believe that nuclear power can work alongside renewables and how it can complement it. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to hopefully try and take down some of the assertions being made by government today. So I'm going to start out with some rebuttal. So firstly, we heard from the second speaker about this idea that nuclear distracts from true renewables, whereas what we actually heard from him was a list of renewable developments that are being made, despite the fact that there is despite the fact that there is nuclear power that is going on today. So we heard quite a contradictory idea from him, the idea that there can't be development in renewables while nuclear exists, and then a list of how renewables are in fact advancing. I'm going to tell you why they can work alongside each other, which is going to be later in my speech. And we also heard this weird idea that funding for nuclear power and renewables are sort of an either-or situation. We don't think this is the case at all. We think that there are two different types of people who'd invest in the different powers. And what we actually heard from my colleague here is actually this fantasy idea that if you stop the fantasy idea presented to us by proposition that if you stop nuclear, suddenly we're going to get renewables isn't true. And this is what we heard from my partner about how, in fact, when you stop nuclear, you get more usage of coal. And this is something we have seen within Britain itself. Yes.
But more funding would go towards renewable energy if the whole concept of nuclear was scrapped.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that actually what governments themselves will be doing is looking for, if you completely ban it, what governments will be doing is trying to get the easy, quick fix and the cheapest fix, which is not doing research into how to make renewable energy viable. It's actually just using more fossil fuels. So what we've heard from the second speaker today is clearly not true. Developments are clearly occurring. So I'm just going to reiterate what we've heard from my colleague, and one of the ideas we heard from first speaker is we heard this idea that governments should be paying for the decommission of these nuclear power plants, whereas in fact actually it's not really governments who'll be taking the hit, it's everyday people who'll be taking the hit, because as we see, decommissioning them is not as easy and as fantasical as we have heard from the proposition. It actually costs in 2007 around £73 billion to decommission a nuclear power plant, and it's estimated that this cost continues rising. Our governments cannot afford to pay this, particularly in this time of economical turmoil. And we also had this idea that the IAEA would be helping to fund it, whereas we think this is quite a weird concept. You as the IAEA are paying to essentially lose your own jobs, because once the nuclear power plants are gone, you don't have a job anymore and you're paying for this to occur. We don't think this is realistic. We actually see that... No, thank you. We actually see that nuclear power is a very good economical idea because you're not having to pay for the decommission. And it actually reduces energy bills, which I'm going to go and talk on later. We also had this idea that local damage is still bad and we should still be worried about it, whereas we think it's completely incomparable to what global warming does. And we've had this idea that things are in landfill underground, whereas they're not. We know that there is a system worked out. We've been working with this stuff for 50 years, and there is a system in place. And the IAEA IAEA already exists and already implements fines whenever breaches are made. So this idea of the safety concern is also something that's come up a lot, whereas we believe that actually just because it's a possibility does not mean it's a real issue. It won't happen if we have well-built, well-maintained power plants, and we feel that it's actually just fear-mongering by the proposition today. So on to my substantive, the idea about how actually it complements renewables. So why do we care about renewables? We care about renewables because they won't run out and because we don't want to destroy the planet. We agree with the proposition on this. However, we also believe that nuclear power basically meets these fundamental ideas. So the waste produced, it doesn't produce any greenhouse gases. The waste produced is at best harmless and at worst very local damage. There are no greenhouse gases emitted, and actually it's not detrimental to the entire planet as a whole. We also believe that nuclear power plants use so little, both in relation to the energy made and in the amount of uranium present on the Earth, that it's viable for a very, very long time. And in fact, we feel that this makes it almost renewable. And also what we see in places like France, in places like La Hague, and England in Sellafield, is that you use reprocessing, which is a form of recycling with this nuclear energy. And in fact, 17% of France's energy comes from this recycled idea of nuclear power. So why would we then, so if we consider nuclear power to be a renewable, why would we use it in the place of real renewables, as it were? So firstly, we see that these ideas of renewables aren't plausible in a lot of places. Some places can't use solar energy. Some places don't have the dams and the infrastructure and the rivers in order to have that. And we feel that it's very expensive and incredibly implausible to try and transport this energy to these isolated areas. And we feel that actually it's much more plausible just to build a nuclear power station nearer to them. And we feel that renewables cannot cope with the slack that's suddenly going to be in place if you remove all these things. Slovakia, for example, relies on 54.7% of its energy comes from nuclear power stations. And if they suddenly don't have that, I know you said you're going to implement it slowly, but nevertheless, suddenly you don't have that source. And you're either going to have to turn to coal because renewables aren't viable. And we also see that nuclear power is actually the most cost effective, which is what I was referring to earlier. So what we see is that with renewable sources, it's about £95 per kilowatt hour, I believe, rather than £100. It's £95 for nuclear rather than the 100 with renewable energy. So actually we see it's more cost effective, and who you're actually at the detriment of is those with low income. Yes.
Don't you think that people would be willing to pay a bit more if it meant that they didn't have any health problems and family members are less likely to die?
What we see actually is if you are in an economically deprived state, you don't have the choice. You need to be able to have this option of cheaper energy, and we feel that it's better if this cheaper energy is coming from something that's not producing greenhouse gases than if it's coming from, say, coal, which is also relatively quite cheap. So what we see today is that you're affecting the economically deprived most in all countries, not just in less economically developed countries. Therefore, so what I've told you today is that nuclear power still conforms to the ideal of renewable energy, and about how because of the fact that it produces no waste that is actually harmful, because we do know how to deal with it, because nuclear power plants are actually use up so little stuff that actually it's very viable for a very long time, and about how they actually do recycle their waste and in reprocessing. We think that all of these means that nuclear still conforms to the ideas that you've set out and the ideals that you've set out, and therefore we've urge you to vote opposition.
I'd like to welcome.
Test, can you hear me? Okay. Hey, take a 30-second breather, stand up, stretch, don't injure yourself. Just 30 seconds. We'll resume soon.
I like that. I like that meme on YouTube where this guy is like
You need to type quickly. 15 seconds, going. It's a workshop. It is a workshop. 10. All right, we're resuming.
The third proposition speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, abandoning nuclear power is both the safest, most economically and environmentally efficient thing that we can do. And I've identified 3 points of clash that I'm going to go over in my speech in order to sort of prove to you why the proposition we think will win this debate today. My first point of clash is going to be, does nuclear power cause unacceptable harm to humans? Secondly, is nuclear power important in protecting the environment? And thirdly, is abandoning nuclear power too expensive to actually bother with doing it? But my first point of clash, does nuclear power cause unacceptable harm to humans? Which obviously we would say yes. So in our speeches today, we've talked to you about plant safety and the safety of nuclear power plants, which we don't think is good enough. Because effectively, you've got a couple of problems with a nuclear power plant. You've got the dangers of explosion, which we've seen in cases such as Chernobyl and things like that. And we think you've also got the long-term dangers, which have been which have been mostly ignored by the opposition today. So they give us this analogy of the plane crash, which we don't actually think represents what we're talking about at all. Because a plane crash, the reason you continue getting in planes and you allow this risk to continue is because it doesn't have the long-term and massive global effects that you have with a nuclear power plant explosion, right? Because they're ignoring, they're ignoring the long-term effects that come with the dangers of radioactivity that affect people, such as in Chernobyl, such as our first speaker talked to you about people in Ukraine and that kind of thing. That that continue to be affected for years, right? So we don't think this analogy stands up, and we think this is the problem with the opposition's argument so far. You've also got the danger of the unavoidability of risk within nuclear power plants. So they tell us that it's a very small chance, and we say that it still happens, even though nuclear power hasn't actually been viable for that long. So we think that the amount of times it's happened is unacceptable. And we give you, we'll give you some examples of harm in other situations, such as, because we think that risk is always unavoidable in like big production situations, such as the factory collapse in Bangladesh and a chemical spill in India. We think that things like this will constantly happen.
Point of information.
I'll take you in a second. We think that things like this will constantly happen, and you can't avoid it in a nuclear power plant, but it's just that the effects are so much worse. Yeah.
Well, you've identified both Chernobyl and Fukushima, but you're using those two examples to justify nuclear energy being dangerous. If you can give us 3 more examples of high-profile accidents, we'll concede the debate.
We don't think you should need 5 examples of a high-profile accident where so many people are dying in order to cancel this. We think that the risks caused by these accidents that we've so far listed are big enough to actually to be a viable reason to get rid of it, right? We think that you can't avoid things like the other unavoidable thing is natural hazards, which is what caused Fukushima, right? You can't avoid things like that in terms of nuclear power. So you're always, you're always going to have these risks, and we don't think that they're worth it. We secondly told you about waste and the risks involved with getting rid of nuclear waste, right? And so they tell you about these procedures and precautions that are in place to deal with it. We say that in the same case as you had the factory collapse and things like that, you're always going to cut corners in terms of business. And we think that, we think that corners have been cut in the past in terms of nuclear waste, such with the cat litter example that my partner talked to you about. And we think that this just shows that mistakes will be made in terms of waste, and the risk is too big to do it. So we don't think that it's a superior alternative to everything else, because we think that the risks such as radioactive poisoning and spills and leaks from the waste is too dangerous to get involved in. Clash number 2. Is nuclear power important in terms of protecting the environment? We reiterate waste is is not safe for anything living. They tell us global warming is more hazardous than nuclear power because nuclear power only has these sort of local effects. We say again they're ignoring the long-term effects that come from it, and they're also ignoring the global effects. That come from it. So you have places in around the countries that are affected that will continue to be affected. By the radioactivity for many years. is, right? We say that they are wrong in saying that it's only local effects and that makes it safer. We say that actually, no, it doesn't.
Point of information.
No, thank you. Secondly, renewable energy, right? We think that this has considerably less risk, and we've already told you on the proposition today why you'll have more focus upon renewable energy in terms of when you get rid of nuclear energy. No, thank you. We think that the procedure will become more efficient and cheaper. Why? Because you'll have more money able to go to it because it won't be focused on nuclear power, right? You'll get the government and you'll get support behind it because once you take away nuclear power, people stop having this weird belief that it's better and thus will support renewable power more, and then there'll be more support behind that, which is only achieved under our model. And we think that everybody agrees that renewable power would be better, right?
Point of information.
No, thank you. Also on renewable power, they say that it's not actually viable yet because, like, in places that they describe as isolated areas without sun and wind and that kind of thing. And we say if they're isolated areas, you're not going to want energy transferred to them anyway because there's not enough people to do that. So we don't think that's a large problem in terms of renewable energy. We think that renewable energy will be good enough in the areas that we actually want to concentrate it in. Thirdly, is abandoning nuclear power too expensive? So firstly, we say it's a slow process, not a great strain on each country because we'll give them a long time. It's not an immediate ban, it's not tomorrow, right? So we think that it won't be an immediate strain on each country economically, and also they'll have the IAEA to assist with cost and dismantling. Yes.
If you've got the amazing IAEA, why don't you use it to make every single process a lot safer rather than wasting billions of pounds trying to decommission every single nuclear power plant? Like, what's the viability in your motion? Why don't you go for a much more sensible alternative that doesn't give in to fossil fuels and instead has like some sense behind it?
We don't think it's possible to do this because we've already seen these examples, and that we think that the examples, the risks will get more the longer you leave them. So the more we have nuclear power for like multiple years, the more risks and the more accidents will occur. If we get rid of them now, then we won't have as many risks. We say that we will be able to do that safely because it's all everybody's concentrating on doing that in a shorter space of time. We think that that's just what happen. That's what will happen because once you've got this process going, it will essentially be safer than just sort of watching them as they do more and more damage throughout the years. Secondly, every bit of money spent on nuclear power is a step away from renewable energy use. So we say that in terms of money, we think that it's a waste of money in the long term when their plants eventually come around to our greener way of thinking and have to convert to renewable energy anyway. That will just be a waste of money in the future. We're just getting there earlier because we think it's safer and because we think it's better for the environment. Thirdly, we say that some cost which will occur, because we're not denying that, is okay because we actually think that a better world that we're aiming for, a greener world and a safer world, is worth it, is worth this amount of cost that will come from decommissioning the plants, right? We think that you should agree that that converting to renewable energy overall and getting rid of the risk that occurs from having these power plants will eventually be worth it. So what have I told you today? I've told you why nuclear power causes unacceptable harm to humans and why we don't think this should be the case anymore. I've told you why nuclear power is not important in protecting the environment. In fact, we should get rid of it. And I've also told you why abandoning nuclear power isn't too expensive because we think it's the best thing in the long run. So for everything I've said, please vote proposition.
I'd like to thank the third proposition speaker, and I'd like to take the third opposition speaker.
There are always going to be risks associated with nuclear power plants. Meltdowns are common. We admit meltdowns are rare. It's a large organisation with numerous members. We'll make a better future for mankind. We think these quotes, first of all, inherently, are conflicting and contradictory. First of all, there's the obvious one. Meltdowns are common. We admit meltdowns are rare. And second of all, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that the proposition side today has a huge misunderstanding of the word risk. Right? So, I'm going to talk to you today about the 3 points of clash that I've identified in this debate. Is the risk of nuclear power acceptable? Which side provides better priced energy? And who better protects the environment? So first of all, I'm going to talk about the risks with nuclear power. So first of all, I'd like to bring in this idea which was danced around by Natasha about there being an inherent danger around nuclear power. So we believe that because we've been working with nuclear power for so long, we understand that there is an inherent danger. We understand that there is a danger around this, and that's why we have safety protocols. We actually believe that the plane crash analogy that was used by my partner Sam very well, although it may not talk about the longer term effects of a meltdown, it does in fact talk about illustrate the risks associated with it very well. We're not going to ban the entirety of the aeroplane industry just because of that Germanwings crash earlier last month. We believe that there are huge benefits that I will outline, that have been outlined to you by both of my colleagues earlier on, that the proposition is completely ignoring, be it about economics or be it about the environment. So first of all, we believe that the proposition has hugely overblown the severity of a lot of nuclear accidents, and they've also hugely overblown the how often they occur. So first of all, we think that the examples that they've given to us today are Fukushima and Chernobyl. Both of these accidents were caused by accentuating circumstances that were oftentimes out of the control of their proprietors. So first of all, I'll take Chernobyl. Chernobyl was a Soviet power station, so it was run under Soviet Soviet safety protocols, which instead of making sure that the plant was safe, what they were actually trying to do was outcompete America at this time. So we believe that the meltdown of Chernobyl was most likely caused by wanting to outcompete the USA and try and build a bigger nuclear reactor and all this stuff. And first of all, and second of all, we believe that the Fukushima nuclear disaster was caused by completely accentuated circumstances. It was caused by an earthquake, ladies and gentlemen. As Natasha quite clearly pointed out, we can't do anything about these earthquakes, right? Except we can do things about these earthquakes, right? So what have we done? What have we done recently? What has the nuclear industry done about earthquakes and nuclear reactors? So since the Fukushima disaster in 2011, power stations on fault lines, all power stations on fault lines, including the rebuilding of the Fukushima nuclear power plant, and also power stations in the state of California which are on fault lines, now have seismometers on them that shut down the nuclear reactor when there is any evidence of an earthquake coming. So we believe, first of all, this is evidence that it shows that we're learning from our mistakes. And second of all, I'll take you in a minute, second of all, it shows the speed of the advancement. Because this disaster was only 4 years ago, we've already advanced so far that we're actually trying, we're going to completely cut these disasters out of the equation. Wouldn't you agree?
No, you admit that Chernobyl was caused by competing businesses. We think this is always going to occur, and this is why they'll cut corners and do things that will make it unsafe. Do you think that that's reasonable, and that cutting corners and allowing competing businesses in nuclear power to occur is worth the lives that it costs?
No, not at all. We believe that Chernobyl was caused not by competing businesses, but by competing nations. We think that is completely separate. I'm not going to go into all the semantics of the Cold War and how capitalism and communism is completely different between a fight between two businesses. Right? I'm not going to try and do that. We think it's a completely different argument. And second of all, I'd like to talk about waste, ladies and gentlemen. So we think also proposition has over-exemplified the problem of nuclear waste. We believe that the amount of waste per year has been over-exaggerated. It's only actually 105 metres cubed, which is about the volume of this classroom right here, right? So there's not actually that much of a problem when putting it away. It's also disposed of using glass and in the concrete containers underground, which my partner Sam mentioned, right? We know about this inherent danger, which I've touched upon earlier. We know about this inherent danger, and there's been problems with nuclear waste in the past. So we have learnt from our mistakes, and we have improved our methods of doing this. So, on to the second clash. So which side provides better priced energy? So we believe that the economics that have been decided by my partner Sam, right? First of all, the cost of building a nuclear power plant is £14 billion. Around £14 billion. And the cost of dismantling one is £73 billion. This was said by my partner Hannah. And it's also rising. So that first of all, you're getting an immediate loss of about £60 billion right there, right at the start. And however long you're going to draw this out upon, however long you're going to draw this out by, it's still going to be an incredibly significant amount of money onto a country's economy. And this is going to have to happen in France, for example, hundreds of times over because of the amount of nuclear power stations there are there. So, and it's also much cheaper per megawatt hour, it's £5 cheaper per megawatt hour, and there's a lot of megawatt hours coming out of these power stations, than renewable energy. So it's cheaper to produce than renewable energy, and it's much greener than coal or fossil fuels. I'm going to touch upon why coal and fossil fuels come into this debate massively in a minute. So therefore, nuclear power gives a better balance between cost and energy produced. So on to the third clash. Who better protects the environment? We do. So we believe that, first of all, there's a reluctance in the modern market to move away from fossil fuels. We think this was said by my partner Sam. So it's evidenced by our ability right now. I believe that we have the ability in this world, particularly in the United Kingdom, to move away from unrenewable energy sources such as coal and fossil fuels. But we're not. We're sticking with them because they produce a quick fix of energy, and that we don't necessarily want to be spending all this money in developing renewable sources of energy, because it's going to take a very long time, and in fact that search for renewable energy may be completely fruitless. So this would in fact lead to greater demand from fossil fuels. It's evidenced by when the UK's nuclear power percentage reduced, as said by my partner Hannah. Our percentage of power that was produced by coal increased, and therefore in turn greenhouse gases. So we believe there's a reluctance to move away from unrenewable energy. And second, we believe the analysis by my partner Hannah beats the analysis that's been given all along the proposition table on renewable energy, over how she says that not everywhere is suited to hydroelectric power or wind farms or things like this. So we think that nuclear power, while it may not be completely renewable, will be renewable for thousands more years, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, there is the plutonium and uranium that comes out of these reactions, which can be recycled and reused again to produce more energy. And second of all, there is an abundant supply of uranium and plutonium still in our Earth. So nuclear, as far as applicable for humans, is still renewable. So ladies and gentlemen, for all the points that I've made, for all the points that my partners have both made, I urge you to vote opposition.
Hey guys, thanks for going through. I'm sure you're still writing notes. Here's how this next section is going to happen. We've reached the end of time for the workshop. I'm not going to keep you, but take these instructions. So firstly, everyone who attended this workshop, including Ryan, who's just left, everyone who attended this workshop, you guys too, you are invited to, you don't have to, but you're invited to record your oral adjudication with this format that you see on the screen. Put it back up. And send us the recording. A member of the Adj Corps will give you feedback, and that way, you have a little more time to go through your notes. Confine your recording, though, to 7 minutes. So we'll follow the Asia practice of OAs being a max of 7 minutes, and we'll get you that feedback. That's your entitlement for going through with us to this whole workshop. Since we're cutting it here, though, and we're not doing this drill live, any questions or things to ask me before I go? So from who's still here? Like Sylvia's here. Hi, Sylvia. Jade, Michael, Stacy. Any questions from you guys? You guys? No? Going once? You just unmute? Yeah, hi.
Where can we get the slides? Are they available?
You will get them shortly after tonight. Jeff's gonna go through the video, see if everything's okay. You'll get the video, so it's recorded. All of this is recorded, and the slides, you'll get them soon. Other questions? No? Okay, so before going, Maya, Alistair, anything to share with the participants before we, say goodbye?
Yeah, please come judge at TSDC.
Please do.
Second.
That was Alistair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is Maya still here? Maya, are you there?
Yes, I just said second that.
Yeah, second that. Yeah, everyone's getting a little tired. Good night, everybody. Have a nice day, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye. Goodbye. You guys too. Oh, what troopers.